I'll never forget that evening. It's etched into my mind like the first crack on a cherished porcelain plate. It was one of those days when the world seemed determined to wring every last drop of energy out of me. Work was a relentless grind, traffic felt like a cruel game, and the rain... Oh, the rain was the cherry on top. It clung to my coat, soaked my shoes, and chilled me to the bone. All I wanted was to get home, collapse on my familiar couch, and let the quiet warmth of the house remind me why I kept pushing through days like this. As I pushed open the front door, the scent of her favorite vanilla candles greeted me. A comforting, familiar note. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe that this was my safe haven, my refuge from the world. The soft glow from the living room spilled into the hallway, and I could hear the faint hum of her laughter. It wasn't loud or exaggerated, just a quiet, intimate chuckle that caught my attention. There she was, my wife Jessica, perched on the armrest of the couch with her phone in hand. Her posture was relaxed, her head tilted slightly, and her face was lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months. The kind of smile she wore wasn't the usual kind you'd see when scrolling through memes or watching a funny video. No, this was different. It was softer, almost glowing, like the kind of smile you save for someone who makes your heart flutter. I froze mid-step, my work bag slipping slightly from my shoulder. That smile, it hit me like a punch to the chest. My stomach knotted as a wave of unease washed over me. Who was she smiling at? And why did it make me feel like I just walked into a moment I wasn't supposed to see? "Hey!" I managed, my voice cracking slightly. "I'm home." She barely glanced up, her fingers still dancing across the screen. "Hi," she said, her tone light but distracted, as though my arrival was an afterthought. I stood there for a moment longer, waiting, hoping for her to put the phone down, to come over and greet me like she used to. But she didn't. Instead, she continued staring at the screen, her lips curling upward in a way that made my chest tighten. It was a smile I hadn't been the reason for in far too long. I tried to shake it off. Maybe it was just a meme, or maybe she was texting her sister. But as I walked past her to drop my bag by the stairs, I couldn't ignore the heavy weight that had settled in my chest. Something didn't feel right. Over the next few days, I found myself replaying that moment in my head more times than I cared to admit. It wasn't just the smile, it was everything else that came with it. Her sudden preoccupation with her phone, the way she tilted it slightly away whenever I was nearby, the notifications that seemed to come more frequently than before. And then there were the small changes. The ones you don't notice at first because they creep in so subtly. She had started wearing a new perfume, one that was different from her usual floral scents. It was rich, bold, almost seductive. When I asked about it, she waved it off casually. "Oh, just something I picked up on sale," she'd said. But the way she avoided my eyes stuck with me. Her routine had changed too. Jessica always had a predictable schedule: work, gym, home. But lately, there were more late nights, more last-minute meetings, and more excuses that didn't quite add up. One evening, I asked her about it. "You've been working a lot lately?" I said, trying to keep my tone light. She shrugged, not looking up from her phone. "Yeah, it's just been busy at the office. We've got some big projects coming up." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the nagging feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. After a few weeks of this, I realized I couldn't ignore it anymore. I needed to know. Maybe it was paranoia, or maybe it was self-preservation, but I had to find out the truth. That's when I got the idea to track her car. A friend of mine, tech-savvy and always tinkering with gadgets, had once shown me how he tracked his own car after it was stolen. The thought had seemed absurd back then, but now it felt like my only option. I borrowed the tracker under the guise of needing it for a security experiment, and carefully installed it in her car one evening while she was in the shower. My hands trembled as I worked, a mix of guilt and determination coursing through me. What if I was wrong? What if I was invading her privacy for no reason? But what if I wasn't? As I secured the device, a lump formed in my throat. This wasn't who I wanted to be, the suspicious husband, the one who didn't trust his own wife. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing on the edge of a cliff, staring down into a truth I wasn't ready to face. Little did I know, The next few weeks would bring answers that would shatter the fragile world I was clinging to. For the next week, my evenings became an exercise in quiet obsession. Every night after Jessica left for work, the little GPS tracker I'd hidden in her car was my lifeline. I'd sit at the kitchen table, laptop open, watching as the tiny blinking on the screen charted her movements. Most nights, it was exactly as she said, commutes to work, quick stops at the gym, or errands around town. But then, one Thursday evening, everything changed. It was supposed to be a late meeting at the office. "We're finalizing a big campaign," she had told me, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear while slipping on her heels. She'd looked perfect, polished, like someone stepping into a movie scene instead of a stuffy office meeting. Something about her outfit struck me as odd. It was a bit more daring than usual, a fitted blazer over a blouse that dipped just slightly lower than I'd ever seen her wear to work. I told myself I was overthinking it, but that knot in my stomach said otherwise. As her car left the driveway, I waited a few minutes before logging into the tracker. At first, everything seemed normal. She drove the usual route to her office downtown, the dot blinking steadily along the familiar streets. I almost closed the laptop, ready to chalk my suspicions up to paranoia, but then the dot veered off course. Instead of heading to her office, her car stopped at a residential complex on the other side of town, a nondescript cluster of beige buildings I didn't recognize. My heart started racing. I told myself it could be anything, a work colleague who lived there, an errand she'd forgotten to mention. But deep down, I already knew the truth. I sat there staring at the screen, torn between wanting to race to the scene and needing to stay composed. After what felt like an eternity, I grabbed my keys and headed out the door, determination pounding in my chest with every step. When I arrived at the complex, her car was parked neatly in front of Building C. The lights in one of the upper windows glowed softly, the curtains drawn. I sat in my car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My breath came in shallow bursts as scenarios raced through my mind. I knew I couldn't march in and demand answers, not yet. Instead, I stayed there watching, hoping for some kind of sign that would confirm or, better yet, deny my worst fears. But nothing happened. The silence around the building felt oppressive, like the calm before a storm. The next day, I decided I needed more clarity. I wasn't ready to confront her, not without solid proof. So, I told her I'd pick her up from work as a surprise. Her hesitation on the phone was palpable, but she couldn't exactly say no. That Friday evening, I arrived at her office building earlier than planned. Her colleagues milled about the parking lot, chatting and packing up for the weekend. I waited, watching the door. It wasn't long before I spotted her. Jessica, arm in arm with a man I'd never seen before. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed sharply in business casual. His hand rested casually on the small of her back as they walked together, laughing at something I couldn't hear. My blood ran cold. I got out of the car, my body moving on autopilot as I approached the two of them. "Jessica," I called, my voice louder than I intended. She froze mid-step, her eyes wide as they darted between me and the man beside her. "Oh, hey," she stammered, her tone artificially bright. "What are you doing here?" "I thought I'd surprise you," I said, my voice tight. "But it looks like I'm the one getting the surprise." The man stepped back slightly, offering me a hand. "Hi, I'm Mark," he said, as though introducing himself to a stranger at a networking event. I didn't take his hand. "I'm her husband," I said, my gaze locking onto Jessica. Her cheeks flushed, and she avoided my eyes. "Mark was just helping me carry some files to my car," she explained quickly, her words tumbling over each other. But my patience had worn thin. "Files?" I said, my tone sharp. "Funny. I don't see any files." Mark muttered something about needing to leave and slipped away, leaving Jessica and me standing alone in the now empty lot. "Who is he, Jessica?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and heartbreak. "He's just a colleague," she said, crossing her arms defensively. "You're being ridiculous." But something in her tone, something in the way she couldn't meet my eyes, gave her away. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. If you don't tell me the truth right now, I'll find it myself. The next day, I did exactly that. I returned to her office, pretending I'd left something in her car the night before. The receptionist was polite but distracted, barely noticing as I slipped past her desk and into the building. As I made my way down the hallway, I heard voices. Jessica's laughter, mixed with a deeper, familiar tone. I followed the sound, my heart pounding in my chest. And there they were. Through the narrow gap in the door, I saw Jessica in Mark's arms, their bodies pressed together, her blouse unbuttoned. It was as if the world stopped spinning. "Jessica," I said, my voice cold and cutting as I pushed the door open. She gasped, pulling away from him as though my presence had burned her. "It's not what it looks like," she cried, scrambling to cover herself. But it was. It was exactly what it looked like. And in that moment, everything I thought I knew about my life came crashing down. The fallout from that day was nothing short of cataclysmic. Jessica's tear-streaked face, her trembling hands clutching her blouse, is an image I'll never forget. The excuses tumbled from her lips like a dam had burst, each one more desperate and nonsensical than the last. "It was a mistake," she cried, reaching for my arm as I stood frozen in the doorway. "It didn't mean anything. Please, just listen to me." I didn't move. I didn't speak. The weight of her betrayal pressed down on me like a boulder, crushing every ounce of love, trust, and respect I'd ever had for her. All I could do was stare at her, a person I no longer recognized. "You need to leave," I finally said, my voice flat and emotionless. She shook her head, her tears falling faster. "No, please. We can fix this. I'll go to therapy. I'll quit my job. Whatever you want. Just don't do this. Don't throw us away." "I'm not the one who threw us away." Support the channel by subscribing. It really makes a difference. I snapped, my anger finally breaking through the dam of shock. "You did that the moment you decided he was worth more than the life we built together." Her sobs grew louder, but I was done. I turned and walked away, ignoring her cries as she begged me to stay, to talk, to forgive. But there was nothing left to say. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of painful conversations, legal consultations, and late nights lying awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I had let it come to this. Jessica moved out, taking only a few bags of clothes and leaving the rest of her belongings behind. She said she'd come back for them, but she never did. She tried, though. Oh, she tried. The texts came first, long, rambling messages about how sorry she was, how much she loved me, and how she'd do anything to make things right. When I didn't reply, the calls started. At first, I let them ring through to voicemail, unwilling to hear her voice. But one night, curiosity got the better of me, and I pressed play. "Hi, it's me. I know you don't want to hear from me, but please call me back. I need to talk to you. I need you to know how sorry I am." She choked back a sob, and I could almost see her sitting there, clutching her phone, tears streaming down her face. It should have hurt. It should have stirred something in me, but all I felt was cold detachment. And then, one day, the voicemails stopped. For months, I heard nothing from her. It was as though she disappeared, and honestly, I was fine with that. I threw myself into work, into hobbies, into rediscovering the pieces of myself that had been lost during the years we were together. But then, like a bad penny, she turned up again. It started innocuously enough. My mom called me one evening, sounding unusually hesitant. "Sweetheart," she said, "I think you should know. Jessica's been trying to reach me." I almost dropped my fork. "What?" "She called me last night," Mom continued, her voice soft. "She wanted to apologize, I think. She said she made a terrible mistake and that she's trying to make amends." "Mom, please tell me you didn't entertain this," I said, my voice tight. "Oh, don't worry," she said with a laugh. "I told her I'm not getting involved in your mess." But she sounded awful, honey. Really awful. And then came the Facebook posts. I don't know what she thought she was accomplishing by dredging up old photos of us. Pictures from vacations, birthdays, anniversaries. each one accompanied by captions like, "I'll never forget the good times we had," or, "Sometimes you don't realize what you've lost until it's gone." The comments were a mix of sympathy and confusion, her friends clearly unsure what to make of her public displays of regret. Meanwhile, I sat back and watched the circus unfold, equal parts amused and irritated. The real gem, though, was the voice notes. "Hey!" Her voice cracked through my headphones one evening as I played one of her messages. "I saw that post you liked about that beach trip we took. Do you remember how happy we were? God, I miss that. I miss you. Please just call me. Just give me a chance to explain." Her tone was so theatrical, so over the top, I couldn't help but laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was so transparently manipulative. She wasn't sorry. She was desperate. Here's the thing about Jessica, though. She was always the type to land on her feet. But this time, life had other plans. I heard through mutual friends that her work partner, the man who had been worth blowing up her marriage, had dumped her within weeks of our separation. Apparently, he had commitment issues. Oh, the irony. She lost her job soon after, a casualty of workplace gossip and dwindling performance. Her friends, the ones who'd been so quick to cheer her on, drifted away when she became more burden than entertainment. And now, she was alone. No friends, no career, no husband, just the echo of the life she'd destroyed. Meanwhile, I was thriving. I had picked up the shattered pieces of my life and rebuilt something stronger, better. I'd met someone new. A woman who made me laugh, who treated me with respect, who reminded me what love was supposed to feel like. And Jessica? Well, she was still out there, calling, posting, pleading. But to me, she was nothing more than a distant memory, a cautionary tale. Because here's the thing, karma has a way of catching up with you. And when it does, it's not pretty. Life has a funny way of balancing the scales, doesn't it? Jessica's world fell apart the same way she dismantled mine, piece by painful piece. And while I wouldn't call myself vindictive, there's a certain satisfaction in knowing that actions have consequences. The last time I heard from her directly was about 2 months ago. It was a dreary Monday evening, and I was halfway through a workout when my phone buzzed with a notification. I glanced at the screen, and there it was. A voice message from Jessica. Against my better judgment, I pressed play. "Hi, it's me, again." Her voice came through, shaky and filled with a forced vulnerability that I'd come to recognize all too well. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I've been thinking about us a lot lately. About everything." I paused the recording for a moment, debating whether to delete it and spare myself the melodrama. But curiosity got the better of me, and I hit play again. "I know I messed up. God, I know. And I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I'm different now. I've been working on myself, going to therapy, trying to understand why I made the choices I did. I miss you. I miss the way we used to be." Her voice cracked, and I could almost picture her sitting in some dimly lit room, clutching her phone with trembling hands. "I see you with her," she continued, her tone suddenly bitter. "Your new girlfriend. She looks nice, but she's not me. She'll never understand you the way I do." That was it. I hit delete and tossed my phone onto the couch, shaking my head in disbelief. The audacity was almost impressive. Almost. But Jessica didn't stop there. Oh no. She had a flair for theatrics, and this wasn't a one-act play. The next day, my mom called again, sounding more amused than anything else. "You're not going to believe this," she said, barely suppressing a laugh. "Jessica sent me flowers." "What?" I nearly choked on my coffee. "A huge bouquet," Mom continued, "with a card. Something about how much she regrets everything and how she'll never stop trying to make things right with you." "Please tell me you threw it out," I groaned. "Of course I did," she said with a chuckle. "But honestly, I almost wanted to keep them. They were gorgeous. Too bad she's not putting that effort into fixing her own life." And that was the crux of it, wasn't it? Jessica wasn't trying to fix anything. She was trying to rewrite history. But life doesn't work like that. The past doesn't just disappear because you're suddenly sorry. Through the grapevine, I learned that she tried to rekindle friendships with people who'd long since moved on. Most of them didn't want anything to do with her anymore. The few who entertained her pity parties told me the same thing. Jessica was stuck, living in a loop of regret and nostalgia. Her attempts to drag me back into her chaos grew more sporadic over time. A text here, a late-night voicemail there, even a comment on one of my Facebook posts once. But eventually, even she seemed to realize that it was futile. Meanwhile, my life continued to blossom. My relationship with Emily, the woman I'd met a few months after the divorce, had grown into something I hadn't thought possible. She was warm, funny, and unapologetically herself. She didn't play games, didn't hide behind excuses or lies. Being with her felt like stepping into the sunlight after years of rain. Jessica must have seen the photos we'd posted, pictures from weekend getaways, family gatherings, quiet nights at home. Maybe that's what fueled her desperate attempts to reconnect. Or maybe she simply couldn't bear the thought of me moving on while she stayed stuck in her self-made misery. The last time I saw her, it wasn't in person but in passing, through the filtered lens of social media. She'd posted another one of her cryptic statuses, something about learning to love yourself before expecting others to love you. Attached was a picture of her sitting on a beach somewhere, staring pensively at the waves. I didn't like it. I didn't comment. I just scrolled past, indifferent. Because here's the truth. I don't hate Jessica. I don't wish her ill. But I don't care about her anymore. She's a chapter in my life that's long since closed, a story I no longer feel the need to revisit. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that life doesn't stop when someone betrays you. Pauses, sure. It throws you off balance, makes you question everything you thought you knew. But eventually it moves on. And if you're willing to put in the work, it moves on to something better. Jessica might still be chasing her version of redemption, but me, I've already found mine. In laughter, in love, in a life that's finally mine to live on my own terms. And that, my friends, is the sweetest kind of justice. Support the channel by subscribing. It really makes a difference.